Today, we look down on the Nationals farm system and we get into one of the Nationals' top prospects, Brady House. And let me tell you this, I think Brady House can make a pretty severe impact on 2025.
You are Locked On Nationals, your daily Washington Nationals podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And thank you all for making Locked On Nationals your first listen every single day, as we are free and available wherever you get your podcast. And of course, I'm your host, Ryan Clary. You can catch me over on Twitter at RyanClary11 and as well as the show page at LO_Nationals. For all your latest Nationals news and notes, make sure to check us out over on Twitter. And while you're at it, search up Locked On Nationals wherever you get your podcast, whether it's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, and more. Check us out wherever you get your podcast. Later on in today's show, which prospect could be a surprise difference maker? And there are a few prospects on this list, but I'm going to narrow it down to one just for you. And I think this guy will be a surprise impact for the Nationals in 2025. We'll discuss that a little bit later on in today's program. But we start off discussing, will Brady House have a major impact in 2025? My short answer, it is yes. The thing with Brady House is he is kind of in my opinion, a very polarizing prospect. Brady House has had like these series of ups and downs really since he became a first-round pick by the Washington Nationals in 2021. Brady House has had so many like streaky months where it's very similar to a lot of Nationals on the Major League roster today. Is that a cause of concern for you? Not necessarily. I still think Brady House will be a very good pro hitter, a very good pro third baseman, and I think he has the potential to be an all-star someday down the road. The thing with Brady House is this. He's still only 21 years old. And a lot of people kind of sleep on that factor here. Brady House back in 2021, when he was selected 11th overall by your Washington Nationals after the 2020 season, which was relatively a debacle, considering it was the COVID year and all things considered under the umbrella there, with the Nationals having COVID and all that mess. Brady House has kind of made his way up to the top of a lot of prospect boards, and he is a top 100 prospect, unequivocally, in my opinion, on any site that you check. And even then, where Brady House sits today, like fringe top 100 guy, I think he could be a lot better. And I do think he is a lot better than what this indicates. But at some point in 2025, whether it's in May, whether it's in July or August, Brady House is going to come up into the majors and make an impact for your Washington Nationals. Dating back to last season when Brady House flew from low A Fredericksburg to high A Wilmington and then quickly got shipped up to double A Harrisburg and joined James Wood and Dylan Cruz, Brady House made an impact at every single stop that he was at. In 2023, that was his best professional season to date. 2024, he took some steps back, but even then, the numbers were a lot better than what they say on paper. Brady House this year in 2024 in double A Harrisburg, he batted .234, a .310 OBP, and a .423 slug for a .733 OPS. But also in that time frame, in 75 games, he had 13 home runs, 34 RBIs, 75 strikeouts, which is relatively high considering he struck out 89 times in 88 games just this past season in 2023. Brady House, he's got the potential to put everything together and be a complete kind of prospect. And the thing that's exciting about Brady House, and the reason why I think he will make an impact for your Nationals, is I don't think the Nats go out there and try to sign a third baseman. I don't think they try and go after an Alex Bregman. I think they're going to try to create their own Alex Bregman here in DC. And the name is Brady House. Alex Bregman has been kind of one of those names that has been talked about a lot this offseason. Not necessarily with the Nationals, but, you know, the Nationals, they have money to spend. Alex Bregman is a flashy free agent. They expect him to leave Houston, and maybe Houston blows things up and tries to rebuild. Who knows what Houston will do at this point in time? But I can tell you this much. I'm not in the market for a third baseman. Brady House will be that guy in 2025. He's not going to start in your opening day roster, although I do think he will have the opportunity during spring training to compete for that job. I don't think he's going to be your opening day third baseman, even if he kills it at the get-go, the start of spring training. Unless the Nationals do some Houdini kind of stuff this offseason and make a couple of nice signings, adding to the starting pitching depth, adding a first baseman, adding another power bat in there, adding an outfielder, whatever it is, then maybe Brady House has that discussion. But I think it's going to be on the similar track of what James Wood was on this season. I think Brady House, again, I've said this before, I think Brady House has the potential to be the best hitter between your Nats' big three prospects. That's Dylan Cruz, James Wood, and Brady House. Dylan Cruz is like the number one prospect in baseball at this point. He's going to be losing his prospect status in the first week of the MLB season, so I don't really consider him a prospect at this point anymore. James Wood was a number one prospect in all of baseball. Killed it for the Nats. 21 years old, stud kind of guy. I think Brady House has the potential to be a better overall hitter, though. And I think Brady House even has the potential to kind of be like a Ryan Zimmerman type for your Washington Nationals. 25 to 30 home runs, batting around 290. That's the kind of ceiling that I expect of House. And also, I think he's a plus defender over at third. This guy came into the league as a shortstop, which is always what you want to see. Someone who is athletic, so can play middle infield as well. The Nats routinely moved him over to third base, and I think it's been a pretty easy transition for the former shortstop. Brady House, at some point in 2025, will be making his debut. But here's the thing. I don't think the impact in 2025 will be as major as a James Wood from what it was this season. I think Brady House could kind of be a cherry on top for this Nationals 2025 team, meaning like if you are in a postseason run, if you do have an opportunity to make a wild card spot, Brady House can certainly lead that charge to get you there. But I don't necessarily see it that way. I think the Nationals will have a lot of work to do in order to make a postseason run this time next season. In fact, they've got a lot of work to do. As you've seen with the Yankees and the Dodgers, these are teams that have built up their farm system for years and years and years. And also, yes, they are two of the top spenders in Major League Baseball. You're going to have to see it one way or the other. The Nationals, you've got a lot of farm system talent right now. You've got these young prospects, but you also have to pair them with your veteran kind of guys. I think Brady House, again, down the road in a few years from now, we'll be talking about a potential all-star kind of player. Someone who will hit 290. Someone who will have 25 to 30 home runs in a season. But in 2025, he doesn't turn 22 until June 6th or something like that. He is still a young puppy in today's game. So going into it in 2025, have your expectations a little bit lower, but still do not be surprised if Brady House does make a gigantic impact on this Nationals team. So thank you all for making Locked On Nationals your first listen every single day, as we are free and available wherever you get your podcast. And of course, you can check us out over on YouTube. Again, search Locked On Nationals, hit that subscriber button, and of course, drop a thumbs up or a thumbs down, leave a comment, whatever you would like to do. That is good with me. A little bit later on, next segment, really. Which prospect could be the surprise difference maker? I've got a handful, but I think I'm going to narrow it down to one guy for you that we'll get into a little bit later on this show. But of course, until then, let me tell you guys about our friends over at FanDuel. And of course, I had told you all about our friends at FanDuel. Then all you have to do is download America's #1 sportsbook for all your NFL action all season long, because NFL fans, we are in the thick of football season right now. And I can tell you this, I love our friends at FanDuel. When it is a Sunday, all I want to do is sit on that couch, eat buffalo chicken dip, and open up FanDuel and make my NFL Sundays more fun. And you can do that. And if you're a first-time user, if you bet $5, you can get $200 in bonus credit guaranteed into your FanDuel account to help maybe place a little money line bet on the Commanders. Or if you're a Bears fan or an Eagles fan, whatever it is, you can place your bets on your favorite team or fade your team as well. You can do that in years past here in DC. We have done that. And of course, I've always had my winnings over on FanDuel. So when you go to FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook today. Again, that is FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. That is FanDuel.com and download America's #1 sportsbook. Thank you all for making Locked On Nationals your first listen every single day, as we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, check us out over on YouTube. Search Locked On Nationals and hit that subscriber button. And of course, wherever you get your podcasts as well, search Locked On Nationals. Let's get into it. Which prospect could be a surprise difference maker for your Washington Nationals in 2025? I've got a handful of guys here. Number one, I want to start off with Robert Hassell III. Robert Hassell III, over these last few weeks, has been crushing the baseball in the Arizona Fall League. I'm not going to get too deep into the numbers with him, but just know Robert Hassell III is actually starting to look like the Robert Hassell III that we thought we were getting back in 2022 when you made that huge Juan Soto deal. People forget about this part of it. Robert Hassell III was a higher ranked prospect than James Wood at one point in time. There was discussions of Robert Hassell making his debut for the Nationals in 2022. And at that point in time, when the Nationals made that trade, we all thought Robert Hassell III would be in the Nationals lineup, batting first or second in the middle of this lineup, playing center field by maybe early 2023. That is what we thought. We are now a little over 2 years removed of that. And Robert Hassell III just got to AAA after being in AA as soon as we traded for him. So people are forgetting about Robert Hassell. I still hold hope that Robert Hassell will be an impact kind of guy for this organization. Now, the numbers this year, again, dealing with injuries, that is really what has hindered him over the last few seasons. He broke his hamate bone back in the Fall League 2 years ago. And even then, there were some rumblings that that was an injury that he previously already had. Not breaking it completely, but I guess he tweaked it a little bit in San Diego, which kind of caused his numbers to fall off just a little bit. But I think a lot of people are underestimating that Robert Hassell III, if he were to be healthy, this is still a pretty high caliber kind of guy that could be a big horse for this Nationals lineup. He plays solid defense. He has the ability to hit 300 at the plate if he were to put it all together. And he's also got some power. And it's not just a little bit of power. He's got some sneaky power, like Dylan Cruz kind of power, in my opinion. Now, I don't think Robert Hassell III will be able to put all of this together, but he is a sneaky kind of surprise difference maker that could make his debut this season, and in fact, probably should. And if he does, I'd be really interested to see what this guy does, because again, he is still also a young kind of guy. Just turned 23 back in August. He's got time to develop. He's in no rush. The Nationals have a solid outfield core sitting here today, entering 2025, and it could even be added to if you go in free agency and try to sign Anthony Santander or wherever. But Robert Hassell III is one of my sneaky kind of difference makers. Another one, similarly, injury history, Cade Cavalli. Cade Cavalli, at one point in time in 2021, when the Nationals were in prospect hell, is what I would call that. Cade Cavalli was the guy that we all looked upon saying he could be the next ace of this staff. He could be the next big deal coming from DC, blowing a 99-mile-per-hour fastball right by you, a nasty curveball that will get swings and misses, and he's going to be the guy. He had a tremendous first season, a full season rather, in 2021, followed by a really good 2022 as well. Fell off a little bit there by the end of 2022, but still, the numbers have been really good, in my opinion, for Cade Cavalli. And he hasn't necessarily been, the most recognizable prospect over the last few seasons here, because he got Tommy John right before the 2023 season started during spring training. He was going to be making his major league debut, or he made his major league debut in 2022, then got shut down there with an injury, went to spring training, had Tommy John, missed the entire 2023 season, and then basically missed the entire 2024 season as well. Only made 3 starts this season. But Cavalli should not be a forgotten member of this team. I think Cade Cavalli could still be that high upside guy that we were all hoping. And in fact, to answer the question of this segment, which prospect could be the surprise difference maker, it's probably going to be him. He's the one that I'm really honing in on. I think Robert Hassel III is also in this picture, but Cade Cavalli is that guy for me. The Nationals are in desperate need of starting pitching help. You cannot go out there again with this main 5-guy rotation that you have. Mackenzie Gore is solid. Jake Irvin is solid. DJ Hers is solid. Mitchell Parker, he's on the fence a little bit. Josiah Gray, Tommy John surgery. Cade Cavalli should be that 5th guy in the rotation. I would be very curious to see what kind of expectations the Nationals do have for Cade Cavalli. Because again, his velo was down a little bit, as you've seen from a lot of guys post Tommy John surgery. But Cade Cavalli still has the stuff, in my opinion, to be a pretty big difference maker. A 60-grade curveball, a solid slider, and as well as a 4-pitch mix of a fastball, curveball, slider, and changeup. All the 4 of those pitches being very useful that can generate swings and misses, and a fastball that used to ride up into the high upper 90s. What kind of bites him in the butt is his control/command, which we've talked about plenty of times on this podcast. But I think Cade Cavalli, he's kind of one of those forgotten about prospects. And again, it would just be interesting to see what he turns out to be someday. Because we're not that far off of Cade Cavalli being a relatively big kind of difference maker for this team. So let's kind of get into Cade Cavalli a little bit more, though. What are your expectations for him? When you sit back at home and think to yourself, well, Cade Cavalli was once a first-round pick. He was a top 50 prospect. People around Major League Baseball were really buzzing about this guy and what he could be for your Nationals. And now, post-Tommy John, the weird 2024 season, you all kind of lose hope a little bit. And I'm one of those as well. Don't forget this, though. He was just about 1.5 years, 2 years ago, supposed to be one of the guys for the Washington Nationals. This is not a Jackson Rutledge type. This is not an Eric Fetty type. Cade Cavalli has a lot more talent than those 2 guys ever did, in my opinion. I don't think he's got the talent of Lucas Giolito back in the day, but he certainly has more talent than Fetty, Jackson Rutledge, and I'll even throw in a Ronaldo Lopez. Cade Cavalli, it's going to be an interesting one to see, but I also have another answer that we're going to get into here because I think this one is going to catch some people by surprise. Someone the Nationals traded for at this last year's trade deadline, you saw limited action for him. He was traded for Hunter Harvey, hint, hint, Kansas City Royals, Caden Wallace. I think Caden Wallace could be a surprise difference maker for your Nationals in 2025. I'm going to tell you why I think that. But until then, listen to this break. Now, we get back into it with Locked On Nationals here. And of course, check us out wherever you get your podcasts. Search Locked On Nationals, again, wherever you get your podcast, whether it's on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, and more. We can tell you all about that right here and right now. Well, I'm going to tell you more about Caden Wallace here. He's one of those guys we don't really necessarily talk enough about, in my opinion, but he is a very intriguing prospect who should be making his debut in 2025, similarly to a lot of other Nationals players. The Nats are actually sneaky loaded when it comes to third baseman prospects. We talked about Brady House in the first segment for a good 10 minutes. We've talked about Trey Lipscomb in the past, who is no longer a prospect, but you get the gist. You also have Seaver King, who could play third base. We'll see where he kind of lines up in the pros, but it's still early to tell. And you also have Caden Wallace. Yohandy Morales as well. He's third base and first base at this point. Who knows where he ends up in the bigs. But Caden Wallace, in my opinion, this is going to be one of those guys where you don't necessarily know what his ceiling is because we don't really know all too much about him. But from what we can tell, this guy is a pretty elite defender, a 65 grade arm over at third, and a 55 grade in the field. You didn't really get to see him all too much, but his offensive numbers that he put up weren't terrible. This season, he had a 683 OPS in 56 games. But I remember when we had Pete Medhurst on, who was at the Bowie Bay Sox game when they were facing off the Harrisburg Senators when Caden Wallace made his debut for your Nationals. Caden Wallace had an electric play over at third, and he also added a few hits in that game as well. I'm not here to tell you that Caden Wallace is going to be some massive difference for your Nationals moving forward. But don't forget about that name. Just because you see Brady House, who's already up in AAA, just because you see Yohandy Morales, who's got a big power bat and seems to be a potential kind of competition for Brady House down the line, don't forget about the fact that Caden Wallace might be the first one up in the bigs between those few guys. And the reason why I say that is he seems to be the more polished prospect at this point. A 23-year-old drafted in the second round back in 2022, has flown through the Kansas City Royals system since been traded to the Nationals. They went all in. The Nationals, they got a pretty solid third base prospect who could be a utility guy or whichever down the road for this Nats organization. But Caden Wallace is just one of those intriguing guys where I sit back and try to think, well, what kind of difference will he make for this team? And I think at some point in time, we will be talking about him making a relatively big impact for this Nationals team, probably as a utility guy. And I think you could see that in 2025. Thank you all for making Locked On Nationals your first listen every single day, as we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, I will catch you guys on the flip side. Have a good one. Enjoy your week.